Welcome back. Well, every parent wants their child to succeed to the best of their ability, so it's little wonder that when teachers, sports coaches and mentors describe children as gifted or talented, many parents feel an overwhelming obligation to ensure their son or daughter realises their full potential. Now, this can often mean more homework, extra hours spent at school and after-school activities, and for some children it all begins at the age of 5 or 6. So this morning on today's agenda, we're asking the question, are we damaging our children by labelling them gifted from an early age? And joining me to discuss is Nine Honey columnist and mother Jo Abbey and child and educational psychologist Andrew Greenfield. Good morning, welcome to you both.
Good morning.
Andrew, is it ever appropriate to label a child gifted?
We have to understand what it means by the term gifted, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there as to what the term gifted means as well. So you can be gifted verbally, you can be gifted with visual spatial skills, you can be gifted in terms of maths ability and music and sports. But you can also, a lot of people don't realise you can be actually gifted but have a learning difficulty, or be what's called twice exceptional, where you're incredibly bright academically, but there's one area that's a significant weakness. So the definition has to be right, and it's an umbrella term for lots of different things.
Is it helpful to point it out and acknowledge it?
Absolutely, I think it is. And the reason why I think it is because there are a lot of difficulties that can be associated with it. I think it's important to identify a child's ability and their strengths and weaknesses and their learning style. So that's incredibly important. But it can also lead to this, not having this incongruence between academic ability and social skills, and kids can be perfectionists as well. So it can lead to behavioural issues if it's not identified and nurtured. So it's important to have a good understanding of what it means for that child.
So I guess what Andrew's saying there, Jo, is it's not always a positive to be gifted.
Yeah, and that's why I sort of disagree and think that the label can be quite damaging. From all of my anecdotal research at 3 different schools and 14 years of parenting, I find quite often that the word gifted is more used by parents as a great reflection on them. My child is gifted, my child is gifted. And particularly when you've got sibling relationships, if you do highlight the fact that one of the children is gifted, then how does that make the siblings feel? And I've seen that play out in really damaging ways on other kids. So, for example, one of my kids is gifted at maths. I try to support that. He's not gifted in many other areas, but what it is, it sets this really high bar, and I think there's a lot of pressure associated with it, particularly when, because they're gifted, you just expect more and more and more, and the very word sort of makes people raise the bar higher and higher. I just can't see that working out well.
Would that explain the high incidence of anxiety in a lot of children, do you think, Andrew? When they're given labels like that, they feel an obligation to fulfil the label.
Sure, and I think there are lots of strengths and weaknesses about a child, and it's important to know not only just define them by one characteristic or one word. And as I said, it's always an umbrella term, so it means lots of different things. So that's important to make sure that you explain that to your child as well, so they know that that is not the only thing that defines them, but it's one part of them, and we need to be able to nurture that and not only just discuss that aspect of them.
From your experience, and I appreciate you call it anecdotal evidence, how much of it is about the parent living vicariously through the child, do you think?
Look, I think quite often it's a lot about the parent. The label gifted makes you feel like a better parent, and I was pretty chuffed when I heard that Giovanni was gifted at algebra. I was like, yay, I'm awesome, but it wasn't about me, and I did nothing to foster that because I'm really, really bad at maths. But the thing is that I also find that it works in the other way. So, for example, if you have a child with a disability or autism, that's a poor reflection on you. And what we need to understand is that our children's performance and who they are and their potential, it has something to do with us, but it isn't a reflection on us. And our responsibility is to raise our humans as the complex, amazing people that they are. And unfortunately, the current education system, and I always go back to this, it measures our kids in one way, it puts pressure on them in a certain way, there's one measure of success, there's one path, and it just drives me absolutely mad because our children want value, meaning and purpose. And we as parents have to meet that need because they're not getting it through most schools.
We put the call out for some feedback on this topic and here's what some of you have had to say. Robin says, why do we need to label children? Let them be little girls and boys. This from Felicity. Apparently all children are gifted now. They get ribbons and certificates even if they fail. And Sharika writes, everything should be balanced. Glorification and the golden child approach can have the same effects on a developing brain as abandonment. Is that an accurate assessment?
I think everyone's taking a little bit too seriously about the labels. It's not about the labels for me. I mean, in my practice, I see many kids with ADHD and learning difficulties, and there's lots of bits and pieces to these kids. It is a lot about the parents. I think you're right. It is about the parents living vicariously through their kids. We need to, I often every day tell parents that it's not about you all the time. I wish it was, but it's not.
What are your thoughts, Andrew, on this sort of world we live in now where every child gets a ribbon? I mean, to me, it almost starts back with Pass the Parcel, where there's a gift in every layer. How is that playing out?
I think it can. I understand it to some degree, but I think at the same time as well, that's life, that not everybody is the winner, not everybody's going to come first, not everyone's going to get a prize. It's important to teach your kids, it may not be your turn today, but maybe tomorrow or the next time. Or let's maybe work on something that you weren't as good at, and we can always thrive for the next opportunity. That's what life is about, not about winning every single situation all the time. That's not realistic at all.
Kids aren't stupid. Like, my daughter got a certificate the other day. I said, oh my gosh, well done. She said, Mum, everyone got one. I mean, they know, they're not dumb. So we've decreased the value of certificates and ribbons and Pass the Parcel by doing that, because they all know and can see with their eyes and their amazing brains that everyone gets one. So I think we've really had an opposite effect with that all-inclusiveness.
And do you think that feeds into this era of entitlement that a lot of millennials are accused of?
Yeah, look, I think that the myth of entitlement is exactly that. It's a myth. I think that children are just struggling to find their place in the world. They're suffering from a lot of anxiety. I think by the time they reach their early 20s, that entitlement is just them trying to find their place and trying to value themselves because they didn't get that in education. And by the way, it's not parents' fault that they actually say that giftedness is a good reflection on them, because parents are judged so harshly. So when I was told Giovanni was gifted at maths, I took a moment to feel proud of the job I was doing, because you get so little recognition for how you raise your children these days. So of course we're going to take it upon ourselves and go, I must be doing something right, because we're rarely told that. We've just got to really open our minds and raise our children in a way that they need, instead of what we need and what society tells us to do.
Final word, Andrew.
Ultimately, I think I was talking to Joe before, it's about happiness, about generally the children feeling happy within themselves. Yes, they've got a whole lot of different labels that they have, and there's a lot of different characteristics, but we want them to be able to succeed in life, which is not necessarily succeeding in tests. I think there's a difference.
All right, happiness, and can I say in equal measure, empathy.
Absolutely.
Oh,
I think
for
there's
sure.
got to be empathy. We're out of time, but thank you both so much for your
Thank
insight.
you.
Lovely to have you here. Over to you, Sylvia.
Great.